Have you ever just stopped and watched a spider spin this incredibly perfect web? Or seen a whole flock of birds just turn all at once in perfect sync? And you just have to wonder, how on earth do they do that? Well, there's a reason for everything they do, and it's not just random. From the tiniest twitch to the most elaborate mating dance, it's all part of a kind of hidden genius, a script written over millions and millions of years of evolution.
And let's be honest, some of their actions can look, well, just plain weird. Like, think about this for a second. Why would a baby goose, just hatched, look at a person and just decide, yep, that's my mom? I mean, it seems to defy all logic. But believe it or not, there is some absolutely incredible science behind that moment. And that's exactly what we're going to get into.
Okay, so here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to cover the absolute basics. What even is animal behavior? Then we'll dive into the stuff that's hardwired from birth, nature's blueprint, you could say. After that, we'll see how animals learn and adapt. We've got some really cool case studies to look at. And finally, we'll tie it all together with the big why, evolution.
All right, first things first. To really get a handle on all this genius stuff, we need to start with the fundamentals. So, what exactly is animal behavior when we're talking about it scientifically?
Well, the field has a name, and it's called ethology. And the name itself is actually really cool. It comes from these two Greek words, ethos, which means something like culture or character, and logos, which means study. So you could almost say ethology is the science of an animal's character, what makes it tick. So at its very core, it all boils down to one simple idea. Behavior is just a response to a stimulus. A stimulus is really just anything that causes a change. It could be something outside, like the smell of a predator, or something inside, like feeling hungry. The animal's nervous system picks up on that signal, processes it, and then, boom, it triggers a response. And that response, that is the behavior. It's this constant loop, sense, process, act. That's life, in a nutshell. So you might be thinking, does every single animal have to learn all this stuff from square one? Absolutely not. A huge chunk of animal behavior is totally innate. It's hardwired right into their DNA, like a survival blueprint that gets passed down from one generation to the next. And a really great example of one of these simple built-in behaviors is something called kinesis. Now, this isn't what you might think. It's not a deliberate movement toward something. It's way simpler than that. It's just a change in how fast an animal moves, all based on what's going on around it. Okay, perfect example, a woodlouse, a roly-poly. It has no idea where the nice damp places are. It doesn't have a map. It just follows one simple pre-programmed rule. If my environment feels dry, I'm going to move around a lot. And if it feels damp, I'm going to slow way down. And what's the result? Well, just by following that one simple rule, it automatically ends up spending most of its time in the humid spots it needs to live. It's just a brilliantly simple and efficient solution to a critical survival problem.
But having this built-in programming is really only half the story. Because the world isn't static, right? It's always changing. And for a ton of animals, survival isn't just about instinct, it's about being able to learn and adapt on the fly.
So is it all just pre-programmed? Not even close. While those innate behaviors give animals a great starting point, the animal kingdom is absolutely packed with incredible learners. They can change what they do based on what happens to them. And this is where things start to get really interesting. And scientists have actually broken down learning into a few major types. You've got habituation, that's basically learning to tune out stuff that doesn't matter, right? Like a bird ignoring city traffic. Then there's imprinting, which is this crazy fast permanent learning that happens right after birth. There's latent learning. That's like soaking up information without any immediate reward, kind of like a squirrel mapping out its neighborhood. And then there's the really cool one, insight learning. That's the sudden aha moment. All right, so this is where all that theory really comes to life. Let's check out a couple of just classic, absolutely brilliant case studies that show exactly how these learning types work in the real world. So first up is imprinting. The best way to think about this is like a camera shutter that only opens once for a very short time. Whatever it sees in that moment is the picture it keeps forever. The two key takeaways here are critical period, this tiny window of opportunity, and irreversible. Once that lesson is learned, it is locked in for life. And this takes us right back to that bizarre question we started with, the goose following a person. The answer comes from a famous ethologist named Konrad Lorenz. He made sure he was the first thing a group of goslings saw when they hatched, and during that super short critical period, their brains basically followed one simple, hardwired instruction. Find the first big thing that moves, that's mom, stick with it. And they did. They followed him everywhere, for the rest of their lives, as if he were their mother. Okay, now let's leap to the complete opposite end of the spectrum with insight learning. This has nothing to do with instinct or doing something over and over. This is all about looking at a problem, thinking it through, and then bam, having that flash of genius, that aha moment where the solution just appears. The most famous example of this comes from a psychologist named Wolfgang Kohler and a chimp named Sultan. So here's the setup. There's a banana just outside Sultan's cage, too far to reach. And inside the cage, there are two sticks, but neither one is long enough by itself. So Sultan tries everything, right? He tries one stick, then the other. He even tries pushing one stick with the other. Nothing works. He gets frustrated, gives up. But then, as he's just kind of messing around with the sticks, he accidentally fits one into the end of the other. And you could practically see the light bulb switch on over his head. In that single moment, he got it. He didn't have two sticks anymore. He had a new tool, and he immediately used his new long stick to grab that banana. Okay, so we've got a goose following pure hardwired instinct, and we've got a chimp having this flash of creative genius. But that still leaves the biggest question on the table. Why? Why these behaviors? Why do they exist at all? Well, to answer that, we have to talk about the grand architect of all of this, evolution. Here's the most important thing to understand. None of this is an accident. The goose's simple rule, the chimp's clever problem solving, these aren't just random quirks of nature. They are incredibly powerful tools, adaptations that have been shaped and perfected over millions of years by the nonstop pressure to survive and reproduce. There's a quote from the textbook Integrated Principles of Zoology that just nails it. It basically says that natural selection explains how organisms are built to survive in their environments. And behavior is part of that construction. It's not separate from the animal's body. It's a tool, just like a sharp claw or a powerful wing, that helps it meet the challenges of life. And how does this shaping process work? Well, it really just boils down to a simple but incredibly powerful three-step recipe. First, you need variation. Not all individuals in a species are exactly the same. Second, those differences have to be heritable. They can be passed down to their kids. And third, you need differential success. This just means that the individuals with the traits that are better for survival and reproduction tend to leave more offspring. You run that simple algorithm for millions of years, and you end up with some seriously effective behaviors. So, okay, we've got this evolutionary blueprint. But how does an animal's body actually, do it? Well, it's basically this amazing partnership between two internal systems. First, you've got the nervous system. Think of this like the body's super fast fiber optic network. It sends electrical signals for lightning quick reactions. A gazelle sees a lion, the nervous system zaps a signal, and it's gone, instant. But then you've got the endocrine system. This is more like the body's postal service. It sends out chemical messages, hormones, through the bloodstream. It's slower, for sure, but the effects can be huge and last a long time. For example, the changing length of a day can trigger hormones that tell a bird it's time to start that long migration south, or signal to an animal that it's ready to mate. That incredible feather display from a peacock, that's not a conscious decision, not really. It's a behavior driven by a surge of hormones, a strategy perfected by evolution to show off how healthy and fit it is. So you have these two systems working together, the fast nerves and the slower, powerful hormones, and they're the engines that make these evolved behaviors happen. Which, of course, brings us to one last really big question. If every animal's behavior is like a story, a living history of the survival problems its ancestors solved, then what about us? What about our own behaviors? I mean, how many of our modern instincts, our gut feelings, our social quirks, how many of those are just echoes from a distant past, the leftover tools our ancestors used to survive their own challenges? When you think about it that way, it's a pretty powerful new way to look at ourselves, isn't it?